Apparently, telling one grown man that his shopping cart could not save his place in the checkout line is now creating unnecessary tension. Which is interesting because I thought a line required an actual person, not a cart sitting there with cereal in it like it had voting rights. And before anyone says, maybe he just stepped away for 1 second, let me tell you where this ended. A cashier had to announce that customers needed to stay with their carts. The man called me line security, and somehow lane 4 stopped moving because I understood the difference between a shopper and a metal basket on wheels. So yes, technically, I said something. I was at the grocery store on a Tuesday evening, which should have been safe. Not weekend chaos, not Sunday panic, just a normal after-work trip where everyone is tired, hungry, and pretending they know what dinner is going to be. I only needed coffee, paper towels, pasta sauce, and one bag of salad that would probably die in my fridge unopened. 4 things. A small trip, the kind of trip where nothing should become a moral issue, that lasted about 9 minutes. The store was busy, but not terrible. Produce was manageable. The bread aisle was calm, and nobody was arguing near the rotisserie chickens, which I took as a hopeful sign. Then I reached checkout, where optimism goes to stand under fluorescent lighting. There were 6 lanes and only 2 open because grocery stores enjoy watching adults slowly lose faith in society. Lane 3 had a family buying enough frozen pizza to survive a weather emergency. Lane 4 looked shorter, so I chose Lane 4 with my little basket and the quiet confidence of someone who had followed the rules. There were 2 people ahead of me, and then in front of them sat one unattended cart. No person, no hand on the handle, no shopper leaning nearby pretending to study gum flavors. Just a cart in the checkout line, holding cereal, sparkling water, paper plates, chips, and salsa. I looked around for the owner. No one waved. No one said, "I'll be right back." No one even did that guilty half-jog people do when they know they are testing a social boundary. The cart simply sat there, claiming space with salsa confidence. If you enjoy watching normal errands turn into arguments about whether shopping carts can participate in society, subscribe, because apparently a cart is not a person is now controversial. At first, I said nothing that matters. I am capable of minding my business for brief, medically impressive periods of time. The woman in front of me glanced at the cart, then glanced at me. I gave her a polite smile, the kind that says, "Yes, I see it too, but I am currently choosing peace." Then the cashier finished with the first customer, and the line moved forward. The man ahead pushed his cart. The woman ahead pushed hers. The abandoned cart did not move because it was, again, a cart. The 2 people ahead of me stepped around it, which meant the cart was now directly in front of me. Still no owner. Still no hand on the handle. Still sitting there like it had been assigned a place by management. I waited a few seconds, then a little longer, and then the cashier said, "Next." I looked at the cart. The cart did not respond because objects are famously quiet. The woman behind me said softly, "I think someone left that there." I said, "I noticed." She laughed under her breath, and that was unfortunate, because once someone laughs, I start believing I have public support. I leaned forward and said to the cashier, "I don't think this cart has a customer with it." The cashier looked tired in the way only cashiers near dinner time can look tired. She said, "Oh, he stepped away. He. So there was a man. A person existed, just not in the line," I said. Then he stepped out of line. The cashier gave me a look that said she had not clocked in for philosophy. "He just went to grab something," she said. And that is where the crack formed, because just went to grab something is how every line becomes optional. I said, still normal. "Right, but the rest of us are standing here." The woman behind me murmured, "Exactly. Tiny support, dangerous support." Then the man appeared from the dairy direction carrying sour cream, shredded cheese, and what looked like a second jar of salsa. Very casual, very relaxed. Like his cart had been patiently holding a spot, and the rest of us were just extras in his grocery trip. He walked straight back to the cart and said, "Excuse me, not sorry. Not thanks for waiting." Excuse me, like I was blocking him from returning to his property line. I said, "Oh, is this yours?" He said, "Yeah. You left it in line." I was grabbing one thing. I looked at his hands. 3 things, that was the first problem. I said, "Looks like 3. Was that necessary?" "No." "Was it visible?" "Yes." He frowned. "What?" "You said one thing. You came back with 3. The woman behind me made another small sound, and the cashier suddenly became very interested in the scanner. The man said, "I was gone for like 2 minutes." I said, "The cart was here for 2 minutes. You were not." Then he said the sentence that turned my mild irritation into a public service announcement. My cart was saving my spot. There it was, the entire argument resting on 4 wheels and a bag of chips. I said, "Your cart can't save your place in line." He stared at me. The woman behind me shifted her basket like she was settling in for a show she did not want to admit she was enjoying. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Very." "It's a line. People stand in it," the cashier said. "Okay, let's just keep things moving." Beautiful idea. Too late for me because now I had a principle, and principles are where errands go to die. The man started unloading his groceries onto the belt, like the matter was settled. I said, "Wait. Are we just pretending you didn't leave?" He said, "Lady, I was right there." I looked toward dairy. Dairy was not right there. Dairy was a different region of the store. "You were in another section," I said. "I could see the lane. Then the lane could see you abandon it." That was too much. I know that now. But he rolled his eyes, and I have never responded well to eye rolling from a man holding sour cream. He told me to relax. I told him to stay with his cart. He said it was not that big of a deal, which is what people say when they are the person who got the benefit. It is never a big deal to the person who saved themselves time. Tell me in the comments. If someone leaves a cart in checkout and disappears, does the cart hold the spot, or does the line move on without them? The cashier scanned one of his items. "Beep! That beep felt like betrayal," I said. "So if I leave my basket here and go finish shopping, that's fine." "I wasn't finishing shopping," he said. "I looked at the sour cream, the shredded cheese, and the second salsa. You expanded." The woman behind me laughed, a real laugh this time. I should have stopped. I did not stop. The man asked, "Are you counting my groceries now?" "They're in your hands." The cashier scanned faster. "Beep, beep, beep." Her face said, "Please let the salsa leave." But the man had started unloading the cart very slowly. Not normal slowly, theatrical slowly. Cereal, sparkling water, paper plates, chips, original salsa, second salsa. I watched the second salsa hit the belt and heard myself say, so this was more of a restock than a quick grab. He turned toward me. "Do you always police checkout lines?" "Only when carts start pretending to be people." The cashier closed her eyes for half a second. A man in the next lane looked over and immediately looked away, like he had spotted a raccoon near an electrical outlet. The woman behind me whispered, "He did leave," and I took that as encouragement. "Wrongly," the man said. "You're holding up the line." That made me laugh, not kindly. "Your unattended cart held up the line first. I'm literally checking out now." "Yes, after your cart completed its shift." A small silence followed, not dramatic, but enough to hear the bagging carousel turn. The cashier said, "Ma'am, I can help you after him." I said, "I understand," but I said it in the tone of someone who did not understand. By that point, I will admit, the original problem was almost over. He had come back. He was paying. The line was moving. I had made my point. Then he picked up his bags, looked at me and said, "Try not to arrest any carts while I'm gone." And that is when I became worse. I said, "Try not to abandon any more property in active lanes." The woman behind me made a noise that might have been a laugh or a prayer. The cashier said, "Have a good night," but she said it to the air. The man walked away, shaking his head. And finally I stepped forward. My turn. My actual human body standing with my actual basket. The cashier scanned my coffee, paper towels, pasta sauce, and salad bag without making eye contact. I said, "I just think lines should have people in them." She said, "No support, no justice, just the sound employees make when they are choosing survival." I added, "Otherwise anyone could park a cart and go finish shopping." She said, "Do you want paper or reusable?" That hurt. I had made an argument about social order, and she responded with bag options. I said, "Reusable, growth, honestly." Then, over the register speaker, the cashier in the next lane said, "If you're in line, please stay with your cart." I looked up. The woman behind me looked up. The cashier scanning my pasta sauce looked very tired. I said, well, just one word, a terrible word. A word that meant I was about to feel vindicated in public. The cashier said, "Please don't." So I didn't, for about 4 seconds. Then I said quietly, "That announcement was not for me." The cashier said, "Okay, just okay." No smile, no nod, no you were right, nothing. I paid and left with my reusable bag and the kind of satisfaction that feels worse when nobody celebrates it. In the parking lot, I passed the man again. He was loading groceries into his car. I could have kept walking, and I should have kept walking. Instead, I slowed down just enough to see if he left his cart behind his car. He did not. He put it in the cart returned perfectly, like a man trying to deny me narrative closure. I muttered, "Convenient. That was unnecessary." He heard me and said, "Still watching carts?" I said, "Only the unsupervised ones." And there it was again. One more comment. One more little victory I did not need. When I got home, my husband asked why I looked proud and irritated at the same time. I said, "A man tried to use a shopping cart as a placeholder." He asked, "Did you get involved?" I said, "Define involved." He sighed, not a good sigh. The next morning, my sister sent me a screenshot from a local community group. Of course she did. The post described a woman at the grocery store making a scene because a man stepped away from his cart for a moment. It made it sound like he had politely blinked out of existence, not wandered off to dairy, and returned with 3 items while the rest of us stood behind his cart. The comments were exactly the kind that make you close your phone and then reopen it immediately. Some people said shoppers needed to mind their business. Others said maybe he forgot something, and everyone should be more patient. I understand forgetting an item. I understand asking, "Do you mind if I grab it?" I even understand stepping 2 feet away if the line is not moving. But leaving a cart in line and disappearing into the store is not the same as standing in line. "There is a difference," my sister texted. "Please tell me this wasn't you," I said. "Define scene," she said. "Did you say a cart can't be a person?" I said, "Not in those exact words." My husband from the kitchen said, "That means yes," I said. "It means legally accurate." He said, "There is no grocery cart law." I said there should be. A week later, I went back to the same store, not because of the cart. I needed coffee. Near checkout, there was a small handwritten sign taped near lane 4. "Please remain with your cart while waiting." Now, am I saying the sign existed because of me? No, I'm simply saying the sign did not exist before the cart incident. That is all. So no, I do not regret saying something. I regret saying it loudly enough that a stranger called me line security. I regret that I inspected his salsa account like it was evidence, and I regret slightly that I now notice unattended carts before I even mean to. Next time, I'll tell you what happened when a woman used 3 empty reusable bags to save chairs at a crowded coffee shop. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because if I have to keep explaining the difference between standing in line and parking equipment in line, we might as well all learn from it together. I was not harassing a shopper. I was not attacking a man. I was protecting checkout from becoming long-term cart storage. My side of the story, obviously.